At some point in the last 50,000 years, every other human species on this planet disappeared. Not one, not two. At least 5 distinct human species, each one walking upright, making tools, burying their dead, caring for their sick, gone. And the only species left is the one you belong to. Science spent a long time telling us the reason was obvious. We were smarter, more adaptable, simply better. But the more researchers dig, literally into the earth, the less that explanation holds. Because the other humans weren't primitive. They weren't failed experiments. Some of them had larger brains than you do. Some survived climate conditions that would have ended us. Some were here for hundreds of thousands of years longer than we have been. So the question isn't really why they disappeared. The question is what we actually did. 40,000 years ago, Earth was not a human planet. It was a planet with humans, plural. If you could stand on the landmass we now call Europe, you would share it with Neanderthals. Move east into the cold expanse of Siberia and Central Asia, and you'd find a third group we now call the Denisovans, known to us only from a finger bone, a tooth, and their DNA. Travel further, down into the islands of Southeast Asia, and you'd find Homo floresiensis on the island of Flores, a species so small, standing just over a meter tall, that when their bones were first discovered in 2003, researchers thought they had found a child. They hadn't. And in the Philippines, as recently as 50,000 years ago, another species, Homo luzonensis, was living on the island of Luzon, leaving behind hand and foot bones with proportions unlike anything seen before. And then there is Homo naledi, discovered in South Africa in 2013, deep inside a cave system so narrow that only the smallest researchers could reach the burial chamber. A species with a brain a third the size of yours, and yet evidence suggests one that deliberately carried its dead into the darkness to lay them to rest. These were not animals that happened to walk upright. These were people. Different from you, but people. And 40,000 years ago, while all of this was happening, Homo sapiens arrived. The easy answer has always been intelligence. We outthought them. Our brains were more complex, our language more sophisticated, our tools more refined. Case closed. Except it isn't. Neanderthals had brains that were, on average, slightly larger than ours. They made tools. They made jewelry from eagle talons and shells. They mixed pigments and painted their bodies. There's evidence they played instruments. They cooked food, planned hunts, and survived multiple ice ages across 300,000 years of European winters that would have tested the limits of any species alive today. 300,000 years. For context, all of recorded human history, every civilization, every empire, every war ever documented, fits inside the last 5,000 years. Neanderthals were here for 60 times that. They were not waiting to be replaced. They were thriving. So if intelligence doesn't explain it, and it doesn't, not cleanly, then something else does. And at around the 90-second mark of trying to find a comfortable answer, you start to realize the real explanation might be about us rather than them. There are 4 serious theories, none of them fully satisfying on their own, all of them probably partially true. The first is climate. The period between 50 and 10,000 years ago was one of severe and rapid climate instability. Ice sheets advanced and retreated. Forests disappeared and returned. Food sources collapsed without warning. Species that had survived previous ice ages by adapting over thousands of generations now had no time to adapt at all. Homo floresiensis may have been finished by a volcanic eruption on Flores around 50,000 years ago. Homo naledi's timeline may have simply run out of environmental luck. Climate as a killer is clean, impersonal, and requires no villain, which is exactly why researchers are increasingly skeptical that it tells the whole story. The second theory is competition. Not violence, just pressure. Homo sapiens arrived in new territories with larger social networks. We cooperated in bigger groups, We traded across longer distances. We could share information about where food was, where predators were, where water could be found, across communities that had never met face to face. When two species occupy the same ecological niche, and one is marginally better at acquiring resources, the math is slow but relentless. The other species doesn't get killed. It just gradually loses access to food, to mates, to territory, until the numbers tip past recovery. Across centuries, that quiet arithmetic becomes extinction. The third theory is the one that changes the story entirely: interbreeding. When geneticists first sequenced the Neanderthal genome in 2010, they found something that rewrote the textbooks. Non-African humans today carry between 1% and 4% Neanderthal DNA, not as a distant echo or a statistical rounding error, as a functional inheritance, genes currently active in your immune system, your metabolism, your skin and hair. You carry Denisovan DNA too, if your ancestry traces back through South or Southeast Asia. The species didn't only disappear. In part, they were absorbed. Homo sapiens and Neanderthals interbred across thousands of years of contact, not once, but repeatedly, in multiple locations across multiple generations. Which means Neanderthals are not entirely gone. They are, in a meaningful biological sense, still here, diluted across billions of people who have no idea they're carrying them. But here is where the fourth theory enters, and it is the most uncomfortable one. Wherever Homo sapiens arrived, other species disappeared shortly after. Not over millions of years, not gradually across geological time, shortly after. In Europe, Neanderthals vanished within 5,000 to 10,000 years of modern humans arriving, which sounds like a long time, until you realize that Neanderthals had survived everything else for 300,000 years without disappearing at all. In Southeast Asia, Homo floresiensis and Homo luzonensis were gone within a few thousand years of modern human presence in the region. The correlation is not subtle. We don't have a skull with a spear in it. We don't have a massacre site, a battlefield, a smoking archaeological gun. What we have is timing. And timing, in science, is not proof, but it is a question that refuses to go away. The working hypothesis that a growing number of researchers now take seriously is that Homo sapiens didn't just outcompete or interbreed with other human species. In at least some cases, we likely displaced them through direct conflict. Not necessarily organized warfare, probably something more opportunistic and diffuse. Raiding, resource denial, territorial pressure, backed by the capacity for coordinated group violence that our larger social networks made possible. Nothing genocidal in any intentional modern sense, just a species that was willing, when resources were tight, to be more aggressive than the one already there. Climate weakened them, competition starved them, interbreeding blurred the edges, and direct pressure, wherever it occurred, finished the job. The answer isn't one thing, it's all of them, arriving together, in an order that left no exit. Here is what sits underneath all of this. We tell ourselves that humans are defined by our intelligence, by our creativity, our empathy, our capacity to build and connect and understand. And we are all of those things, genuinely, verifiably, measurably. But the species that survived wasn't the most intelligent one. Neanderthals were arguably our cognitive equals. It wasn't the most resilient one. They had outlasted conditions we never faced. It wasn't the most spiritually complex. Homo naledi was placing its dead in the dark long before we arrived. What Homo sapiens had, what we still have, is the ability to organize strangers into coordinated groups, to share abstract information across distance, and to act collectively in ways no other species could match. That is genuinely extraordinary. It built medicine and music and the internet and this video you're watching right now. It also, in all probability, ended 5 branches of the human family tree that had every right to still be here. The Neanderthal didn't disappear because it was inferior. It disappeared because it was in the way. And the species that removed it is the one that looks back at you in the mirror every morning, carrying somewhere in its genome the faint genetic echo of everything it replaced. That's not a comfortable thought, but it might be the most important one we have.